Hello, my name is Tanno of Ikyu. In this session, I will talk about the use case of a GraphQL client relay which evolve along React. Thank you so much for joining me today. Just briefly introduce myself. I am an engineer at Ikyu and have been involved in the restaurant reservation business. Recently, I have developed and have been developing features and services around restaurant service providers. I'm often in charge of a web front end as a part of the project. There are 3 topics for this session. First, what is Relay in the first place? The second topic is why did we choose Relay? Third topic is what we achieved with Relay and the issues that we identified during the course of Relay usage and implementation. So then the first topic, what is Relay in the first place? So the Relay is a client library which communicates with GraphQL server. And together with the front end application, you can use it together. So as a client library, together with the React, there are many other libraries. But some specific features, let me take that back. So some of the features of the Relay is that it's actually development done by Meta, same as React. So this session, or the first part, just cover the overview of that point. So the next topic is that why did we choose Relay? So first, let me talk about which product we adopted, because it will be easier for you to understand why we chose it. So currently, what we're developing is the things used by the restaurant service provider, specifically, and capturing information of the customers coming to the restaurants, and also the product which is in charge of the management of the tables. To be specific for the usage, I'm sure that you book a table online, and then the booking information of the customer is recorded ahead of the time, so that when a customer comes to the restaurant, then the service staff know what kind of customers came in for the better service. And also, the table management can be done smoothly, and how many more reservations that the restaurant can take based on the data coming from the table management app. And there are some customers who just come by without any reservation, so that this product will tell the service provider that whether they can take this customer or not. So as I just explained, this product is used by a restaurant service providing a staff member that right in front of the customer, so it needs to be quick in the operation. As you can see here as in screenshot, this is actually just the UI. And this product is newly developed and is still under development and not yet released. So we adopted Relay to this product, which is under development. So why did we choose Relay? So the decision was made at the time of the selection of the technology for the new product. Before discussing whether we should adopt it or not, there was actually the discussion point of whether we should actually choose the GraphQL or not. The reason for the adoption of the GraphQL was we've already have an experience of using GraphQL, and the user experience with GraphQL was good. And another point is there are many other use cases available within a company so that the ecosystem has been already built and enriched, so we decided to go for it. There was another point that we needed to decide it ahead of the time, which is UI library. Not only our development team, but as an entire company, we often use Vue.js, but we decided to go for React instead. The reason for that is not only the Vue.js, but we wanted to accumulate the knowledge on the React as well, besides Vue.js, which will allow us to make a better decision in terms of the technology. So the third point comes to the centerpiece of the session, which is the GraphQL client and the decision on the React. We wanted to actually use the React and GraphQL proactively. And we saw that like high affinity because both of them are developed by the same meta. And we decided to use the GraphQL and React to do the front end. And then we adopted Relay. This is something related to the latter half of the session. So we use Next.js to develop a product. So we decided to adopt the Relay, and we've been working on the development. So what so far we have achieved and what the things that we haven't been able to achieve. So first of all, there are things that we had to do in terms of the adoption of the Relay, and here is a GraphQL solver specification. In a case, there was actually no mandatory things to do, but when it comes to the usage of the Relay, these are the things that we need to do as a mandatory. So we saw it as some restrictions. Let me just quickly touch upon what's this GraphQL specification. So there's the object identification. So all the objects should have a unique ID. And as a part of the specification, there is an item called the connections. Those who use other than the Relay. I believe that you often refer to this, but so this is actually specifications to properly use the things. So these two items are needed as a part of the specification, and we need to build the Saba accordingly. And we are developing a GraphQL from the scratch, so these two things need to be satisfied ahead of the time. And now, so what we have achieved with Relay. So these are the list of the things that we accomplished. I'll go one by one. First is fragment colocation. So the fragment is is a scheme to partially declare a part of GraphQL query. So the custom QL is a fragment. So fragment colocation is using the fragment. So you can do the declaration, and then you can actually display the name. So in this example, blue highlighted area, customer to do, which is appearing in a component, and then the red highlighted one, customer no name. So these are actually the sample code. So the customer name, which is interested in this information, the customer's name and how to read, all these the customer related name information is in this component. With this information, each component can directly deal with the items directly related to that subject component. If we're not going to do the fragmented collocation, what would happen? If you don't do the fragmented collocation, instead of writing each component for the data acquisition, all the necessary data will be listed in the parent component. In such case, what's going to be the problem, what we have to be careful, is that the overfetch. So in this case, the sum data is something we obtain. And so in this case, you don't have to obtain. In order to obtain the relevant data, the computing resources as well as the network resources would be used unnecessary. And there is another issue called underfetch. And as you can find here, the second from the bottom, name Kana, this is like a customer related information. If we decided not going to obtain that information, and then the related and necessary information is not going to obtain, which is a problem. And also, if we look at this from the different perspective, without the fragment collocation, component and necessary data declaration will be isolated and separated so that the partial rendering would be very difficult. So that's another disadvantage of no fragment collocation. So in case of fragment collocation, overhead fetch and underfetch issue will be avoided. And when we need to make a change on the specification, we don't have to be afraid of the overfetch and underfetch and still maintain a certain level of the speed. And those are the things that we have been able to accomplish with Relay. Another thing as a part of the accomplishment with Relay is the render as you fetch. Renders you fetch is that while fetching, you can render it. So prior to the rendering, you can start the data acquisition. So the fetching and the renderings are happening at the same time. Render as you fetch is, as you can find here, compares to the fetch and the render. We can quickly fetch the data and we can render it faster. And then appropriate fallback can be displayed. That's the advantage of the render as you fetch. But in order to materialize the render as you fetch, there are two things that you need to be aware of.
One is outside the flow of rendering, you can do the get data, and also it responds to React And with relay, since these conditions are met, the render Azure Fetch can be done by writing front-end application. And take an example of a product. On the left-hand side of the screenshot, there are customer lists. If you click customer list, you will see the information of the customer. And what is the code then? Within the click event, the GraphQL query starts fetching. And then in parallel, the component rendering takes place. And the customer detail component is rendered. Then, if there is no full data, then it is suspended with relay. So we can take the strategy of render as you fetch, and we will be able to deliver faster and better experiences with relay. Thirdly, we could ensure the safety with relay, the GraphQL schema, and GraphQL query. The relay compiler or relay artifacts file is created in advance. And this automated file, the TypeScript type information can be output, and with this information, it will be able to receive the support of the type. And in the configuration file of the relay, there's a language option of TypeScript, and by specifying TypeScript, you'll be able to output TypeScript. So with outflow type, it uses TypeScript, and then you'll be able to use relay even in that case. Specifically, how does type safety work? There are 2 points that I'd like to mention. The left-hand side example shows the data that is not acquired through Fragment. And if we make a reference, there is a type check, and it is represented on edit with this script. And so the data that is not existing can be found quickly. And on the right, a fragment is in the component, but the parent component query is not declared. Then, with type check, you'll be able to discover that as well. And not just checking types, but the data storage support is available, so it is very quick and safe with this type safety. Thirdly, can we reduce wasteful requests by cache relay? Like other GraphQL clients, the data acquired from server is cached to the client with a certain mechanism, and this allows reducing wasteful requests. For instance, as mentioned, a customer, the information of customer can be switched, and if you represent the original customer, then the data can be acquired from cache. Therefore, quickly, you'll be able to show data to user and also be able to reduce wasteful network requests. Next, the consistency of data and view. I was talking about cache, and this relates to the cache. For instance, the name of the customer is changed. What happens? The customer name, there is a list on the left and there is a detail on the right, and the information is identical. But if you change the customer name, you can tell the cache the change. And if you edit, as a result, the list on the name of the list on the left can also be changed. The point is, The mutation is to change the name, and the response to the mutation is by receiving the name after the change, the relay can reflect cache on the store, and the data that is making reference to the cache is rendered. As a result, even you are not aware of controlling cache, you'll be able to update upon necessity. That is a benefit of relay. Also, cache is normalized cache, so to say, and the component making reference to that data is changed. Nothing else is changed. So among the customer list, if there is any change of the name of the customer, then that is rendered. That is an optimization. Next. Well, I have been talking about what we have gained so far. Next, I'd like to talk about the problem that we faced and things that we haven't been able to do. First, there's some behavior that was not in the document. The left schema, there are unique IDs in different objects, and this is a warning from relay. So we need to change or revise schema on to the right. So this is not even the object does not implement node if there is any ID. If you want to cache, that is the typical behavior of relay, and maybe that is why you face this issue. That's why I wanted to introduce this to you. Next, what we haven't been able to do is as follows. In the render as you fetch, there are partial or incremental rendering combined. I was talking about render as you fetch before, and you add incremental rendering to render as you fetch. This is advanced rendering strategy. For instance, the customer information is rendered, and above, the data can be acquired quickly, but the left, below, in red, the data acquisition may take time. So you might want to just look at the user above, and then you will do the rendering below later and do the rest of the rendering first. That might be a potential use case. In that case, defer or stream graphic directive can be used to do the partial rendering. The partial data acquisition for partial rendering becomes possible. And relay has partial data acquisition support such as defer and stream, but we haven't been able to do the partial rendering yet. Why not? Because to enable defer and stream and to return data bits by bits, and we need to enable server to do so, but we haven't been able to implement that on server yet. Therefore, relay itself is supported, but because of other factors, we haven't been able to do this yet. The application that we have, there's some partial data, but we don't have any partial heavy data yet, so that is not an urgent issue. But if there is any data with less acquisition cost, or if we want to improve the user experiences, we want to take these options. Therefore, we are researching and we'd like to continue validating this, but we haven't been able to do this yet. The third issue is we want to combine server-side rendering with Next.js. The sample implementation repository has sample implementation, and we are implementing referring to that sample implementation. And SSR is already possible, but there are two issues. First, how do we implement this? The get server-side procs allows curly load. As a result, we pass the result to the page component and make it the initial value of the relay. And the get server-side props, and there is a root. Before completing data acquisition, we cannot return anything to clients. That's a problem. Therefore, it takes such a long time to acquire data. That becomes a problem. Second is on your right, the props gained from the SSL needs to be passed to clients, and there is a code for that. But if you have to write the code to, and you have to consider the internal structure of relay, and it is a little troublesome. And if there's any change of the specification of the relay, we have to also follow, and that is a risk. Currently, our applications don't have any critical issues yet, but we want to pursue better experiences. Therefore, we want to add this as another choice. And the Next.js streaming SSL is a function that we need to enable, and so we have to watch the trend of the ecosystem. Last but not least, our future outlook is Relay has other functions that I haven't been able to introduce to you today, but we'd like to use those functions as well. As the necessity arises, we'd like to make the use of these features. Second, as I mentioned in the last part of my session, the React and ecosystem will evolve, and we'd like to follow those evolution. And so if the time comes to implement, and if it improves the user experiences, we would like to adopt those features actively. Lastly, I'd like to summarize what I have talked about by using Lay, the fragment colocation, and also the ensuring safety, and we'll be able to improve the user experiences. And maybe we haven't been able to catch up yet with the evolution of the day. And in order to pursue the evolution of the day, I think this is our best choice. And this concludes my session. Thank you very much. Mr. Tanno, thank you very much. Now we have plus talk, and we will invite interviewer, and the interviewer will ask some of the questions, and we will deep dive the session. And also, as much as possible, we'd like to entertain questions from viewers and have conversation with him. If you have any question, please post your question from the right-hand side below. There is a question mark. Please send us questions. And interviewer is Yuta Okumura from Line. Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Okumura from Line, and I'm seconded to Demaikan, and I am the front-end manager at Demaikan. And I'd like to ask you a question. And at Demaikan, we are using GraphQL now, and we are using full client. And with full client, there are some issues. Specifically, the server-side rendering performance is not very good, and we have some memory leak as well. So we are thinking of considering migrating to something else. And Relay, you are implementing Relay, and also you're using many other things at Ikyu, and you, Mr. Tanno, you adopted Relay. And what was the best thing about introducing Relay? Let me see. Simply put, the new function of React is combined, and we have more choices to create better experiences. That was good. And the other benefit is that fragment collocation fits well. So when we do the review, how the data is used, it becomes easier to understand how the data is used. So fragment collocation is a big point for us.
Right, as listening to your sessions, fragmented collocation theoretically could be replaceable with the other system, but this is more like a forcible thing. Right, because I briefly brought up some cases without the fragmented collocations, speaking about the parent components as a use case. We could somehow handle it without fragment collocation, but it will be quite a struggle that we need to go through. Right. So based on the relay rule, the implementation is going to be very streamlined. Yeah, it will help guide us, it will really guide us through the good practice. When you use a relay, for example, in your presentation, you have to actually to take the server specification. So there are some like a struggle that you have to be aware of. Is there anything that you're not quite sure about the relay? Well, documents on the relay, this is my personal opinion, but the documents related to the relay was somehow kind of challenging us to consume. So that actually made me reluctant to. I've been researching in, referring us to the relay documents. Yeah, documents is not that easy to digest. Maybe the first impression would be that it's difficult to understand. The fragmented collocation, I didn't fully understand. But after listening to your presentation, I had a better understanding on what the fragmented collocation is. Because there's a limited resources on the documents, so I'm sure that there are some like the points that you had difficulties in implementation. So how did you overcome such obstacles? Relay repositories and hub repositories. There aren't so many Japanese articles available to help us get through the issue. And also, there are some behaviors not documented. So we had to really watch and monitor the relay to kind of figure out on our own, like, oh, that's what you mean. And then really sunk in. So in other words, to say, reading the GitHub code and the reading the code, you have to actually take that far to have a full understanding. APIs are simple and easy to use. But yet once you actually hit the difficult issue, then you have to actually take an extra step to figure it out. Yeah, it sounds like quite a challenging for me. But we cannot say that the other clients provides us a full, rich sources. Maybe that it is not really disseminated that well in the community. I'm not sure about that, but when I look around myself, many people use MySQL or the GraphQL. And I often hear that many people started to adopt this solution so that I could see some potential out of it. There's a good news here. Recently, gradually, as the relays of public documents is being So maybe as the document will be well organized down the road, we are still in the moment. I'm sorry if that's not the case after all. Yeah, the meta is there, and the React guidelines quite rich, so they hope that more documentation will be coming along. And the currently developed product, it's still under development. Its release will be coming later, but the number of the screen, the resources, can you actually give us the idea of the size of the team? The number of the screens, because the page is mainly dealing with the customer's information. On top of that, like a peripheral setting pages are needed. So less than 5 pages. And as I said, like as for the table management is something we're going to implement. And if we're going to have that part, and that would add more pages.
And the size of the team is 6 people and 3 are front end. I see. I understand. Right. So one team is formed of server side and front end, right? Yes. If the size becomes bigger, then you will perhaps gain the benefit of GraphQL. That's my impression. Maybe the GraphQL is a good fit for large-scale development, or are there any points that you feel rather troublesome? Let me see. The applications will become more complicated, and the fragment collocation will be very effective as the application becomes more complicated. And if there are so many frequent changes, we will feel comfortable making changes. The more or the larger the scale of the system becomes, and also the cache, the data and UI integrity or consistency. Relatively speaking, we receive the support of the day and we can maintain the consistency. The more complicated it becomes, the more difficult it becomes. So we will grow the system, but I feel comfortable. Thank you. You were talking about cache, and cache is hard sometimes. Tanno-san, you're making product, and so Temp will manage the product, and as you use, maybe new reservation will come, or maybe store clerks, a few store staff may use and may have to update the applications, and that's what I mentioned. And how do you do the cache in that case? I have no idea. Such a great question. Well, we don't have the policy yet. One of the choices is there's a GraphQL function called subscription, and if there's any change on server, notify clients. Or maybe at more appropriate timing, maybe acquire entire data. We are not yet sure which way to go, but we have to think about that. It's a very good point. Thank you. We have a question. You're doing the relay fetch with page. Well, the question is, let me see, with the Next.js, and you are using the Node.js, and therefore this, you don't want to connect externally, so you try to not mock the information that you got with the relay, but you don't know how to do the mock. It seems like. What do you think? I see. Let me see. Well, actually, we are not yet testing appropriately, but there's things that we wish we could be successful, such as MS level, by using network level mock. The relay itself can perhaps be run more smoothly. Then it might become possible, but we haven't been able to do it yet. So it may not be a very good advice. So to do the mock on a network level, that might be an option. Thank you very much.